What it is, Hulksters. Hater on the road up in this piece. I was going to make another video today, and I actually did. Maybe I'll release it later. But one of my best friends, actually two of my best friends, messaged me telling me that Hulk Hogan died. You know what I mean? What the hell? I didn't know this was even happening. And now you're going to see, like, you know, you're going to hear some messages come in. It's about that. To your boy, the hater. Now, I mean, it's just nuts. Honestly, like, shout out to Hulk Hogan. You know, I'm not going to be somber about it. And I'm not going to be, like, all butthurt and sad about it. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, life goes on, and I did not know Hulk Hogan personally, right? So I'm not going to, like, mourn him and be sad like a bunch of weirdos are probably going to be, you know what I mean? Like, can you imagine when, like, CM Punk dies? Hopefully it's in a long, long time, you know what I mean? But when he dies, like, people are going to start crying, like, you know, being weird. But, you know, it's obviously a sad day for wrestling, right? Now, I know what some of you neckbeards are thinking immediately. You're thinking, wait a second, hater. Hulk Hogan was a virulent racist. He ruined his legacy. First of all, even if that's true, you know what I mean? Nobody gives a fuck because the man is dead, all right? And quite frankly, like, that shouldn't be on the forefront today, right? Number two, in my opinion, like, the standards have gotten so loose, right? It's like sometimes people say horrible things. It does not make them horrible people. You know what I'm saying? It's called making mistakes, motherfucks. We all do it. We all make mistakes. Now, some of us don't make mistakes about racism. We make even worse mistakes. You know, like committing crimes and shit like that. Drinking and driving, cuckolds. So I don't think it's appropriate to judge anyways. But even if you are in the camp of Hulk Hogan is a racist or should be erased from legacy, which is weird in my opinion, like, the man's dead today. You know what I mean? Very, very sad. You know, this is like effectively a tribute to Hulk Hogan's legacy from your boy, the hater, right? He was only 71. Now, 71, obviously, you're not a spring chicken. You know what I mean? But 71 is, like, not that old either. You know what I mean? The problem is, like, Hulk Hogan, you know, obviously he's, like, beating his own ass for years, just getting hurt and stuff like that. You know, obviously, any kind of drugs, alcohol abuse, steroid abuse, that's not going to be good for your heart-a-roo. And I think that's what happened. I think he had a cardiac arrest. I'm basing this on my friend's text up in this bitch. You know what I'm saying? So what if he's wrong? If you're wrong, you suck. You know who you are, cuck. Anyways, the point is, you know, Hulk Hogan is undisputedly, like, I don't think anybody can really say, you know, we can joke around. I can make a video saying John Cena is the GOAT, but, you know, we all know deep inside our hearts that Hulk Hogan is wrestling, right? Aside from Vincent Kennedy McMahon, who is obviously the most important figure in the history of wrestling, nobody comes close in terms of importance to the Hulkster, brother. You know what I mean? Hulk Hogan is that dude, right? Hulk Hogan is, and definitely was, a worldwide figure, right? The hater is from a tiny little country in Europe, you know, that didn't know much about, like, the outside world for a long time, right? This is before the haters' time, you know, during communism and shit. But after that, there were a few people that people kind of just knew, right? A few actors and stuff like that, of course. But one of them was Hulk Hogan. People knew Yokozuna and Hulk Hogan. Actually, in my country, to call someone Yokozuna, if you call them like you're such a Yokozuna, it just means he's a fat bastard, you know what I mean? Because we take fat shaming really seriously in my country. So anyways, the point is, people knew who Hulk Hogan was, right? His legacy goes beyond wrestling, right? Hulk Hogan is a bona fide pop culture icon globally. And he's one of very few people to achieve that status, right? In addition, obviously, it goes without saying, Hulk Hogan in wrestling is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. Oh, he only had 3 moves and his finisher was a leg drop. That's all he needed, motherfucks. Because look at Hulk Hogan. Yes, if you're Gunther, you got to get to the top rope and dive. If you're Hulk Hogan, dropping the big dick leg drop is going to be enough. You understand what I'm saying? Simple as that. Hulk Hogan is responsible for so many great elements of wrestling, right? First of all, the Hulk Up, right? The Hulk Up, which is like, a lot of people do it, like Daniel Bryan does it. A bunch of other people have, like, their comeback moments, which are effectively the same thing. But nobody does it better than Hulk Hogan, right? The whole, like, he starts, like, dancing around, then the person punches him, and he just no-sells it and says, "You!" and then beats the hell out of the guy off the ropes. Big boot, big dick leg drop. That's the end of that, usually. You know what I mean? Hulk Hogan was also instrumental in WrestleMania history, right? If it weren't for Hulk Hogan, like, there is not one wrestler aside from Hulk Hogan that you can say this about. Maybe The Rock, right? Maybe The Rock, maybe like on a smaller level Stone Cold, but Hulk Hogan, it's undoubted, like it's a fact, right? If Hulk Hogan didn't exist, wrestling would certainly not be where it is today. And I think that is the number one metric of who is the real GOAT, right? Fundamentally speaking, if Ric Flair didn't exist today, or didn't exist at all, I should say, wrestling today would be in a very similar place. Maybe Dusty Rhodes would have had a few world titles. Some things would have been shuffled around, but that's pretty much it. Like, nobody would really give a flying fuck. You know what I mean? In WCW, maybe Bret Hart would have been champion a few more times. Maybe Booker T would have been champion earlier. Some things like that may have been different, but fundamentally, nobody would give a rat's ass if Ric Flair did or didn't exist. His impact on wrestling, relatively speaking, is relatively small. Now, it's definitely big compared to, like, fucking, Trent Beretta, right? But it's not big compared to anybody of significance like the Hulkster, right? Triple H, like, if he didn't exist, nobody would care, right? You could just replace Triple H with, like, Al Snow, and, like, yeah, it would be less entertaining probably, but in the long run, nobody would give a shit, right? And same thing for anybody that honestly comes after Triple H as a world champion. Like, it's as simple as that, right? Maybe some arguments like Brock Lesnar, he had a big impact just because of, like, how fucking awesome he was, and also the fact that, like, he made SmackDown watchable. But, really it's just Hulk Hogan, motherfucks. The Rock and Stone Cold, they're responsible for the Attitude Era on the other side of the equation, so they're obviously important too. But I don't think anybody's as important as Hulk Hogan. Like, if you compare him, and this is why, like, honestly, this is why, like, a Japanese wrestler can never be the best wrestler of all time, because fundamentally, a Japanese wrestler, unless they performed in WWE, right? But, like, like Kenta Kobayashi, like, if he didn't exist, like, WWE would be the same, right? If New Japan didn't exist, if All Japan didn't exist, WWE would be the same. Like, nobody gives a shit. Vince McMahon never took any cues from these jabrones, So WWE would have, like, flourished as it did, right? But if Hulk Hogan wasn't there would be no WWE, in my opinion, motherfuckers. People underestimate the first cell, right? Imagine this, motherfuckers. Imagine, nobody has discovered coffee yet, right? And you're the first motherfuck to discover coffee and make a drink out of it. And then you go around the world telling people, hey, I discovered this drink, man. It's going to be amazing. And people will be like, let me try it. You give them coffee, they're going to be like, man, this is bitter. It tastes like shit, And then you tell them, look, I'm going to make this one of the biggest drinks of all time, right? People will be like, what the fuck are you talking? No, you won't, right? Imagine the first cell to make coffee a big thing, right? It's not inherently tasty. I love coffee, but I've grown accustomed to it over the last, almost 30 years of my life that I've been drinking coffee, right? Like, there was a point where I couldn't drink espressos because they were too bitter. Now I drink a triple espresso, like, for breakfast, So imagine that big sell. Another big sell, even bigger arguably than coffee, is someone coming to you and saying, I'm going to make one of the biggest TV shows of all time. And then they would ask you, cool, what is it about? You would say, well, it's a live sports-based TV show, right, where grown men in tights pretend to fight for various reasons. The person would say, tell me more. And then you would say, well, it's going to be set up. It's going to be fake. It's going to be predetermined, right? It's going to be like, done differently in a sense that, like, we're going to try to not get each other hurt. It's a performance, but we're going to present it as if it's real in front of a fucking live audience. You would be laughed out of the room if you had presented that proposition without wrestling already existing. And in my personal opinion, if you presented wrestling like this without Hulk Hogan, it would never be as big as it is. Sure, it would exist in beer halls and things like that, right? Bingo halls, pool halls, any other kind of low-level hall you could think of, high school gyms, it might still exist there. But nobody would give a shit. That's the fact, motherfuckers. Before WrestleMania, before Hulk Hogan came around and made wrestling, right? Nobody gave a fuck. Hulk Hogan made it global. And for that, in my personal opinion, Hulk Hogan is not only an excellent figure in the history of wrestling, he is, perhaps even more importantly, an excellent figure in the history of entertainment. Hulk Hogan has entertained everyone here. Everyone that's listening to this has at one point been entertained by Hulk Hogan. If not, do what the hater did 2 days ago and go look at the debut of Mr. America. You know what I mean? Which is Hulk Hogan, dressed as with American regalia, right? Think about that. Even that was entertaining later in his career. Hulk Hogan had the ideal physique, except for, of course, the bald head. Rest in peace. You know what I'm saying? And one of the greatest promos of all time is the Hogan turning heel promo, where he's just like flexing every muscle. I'm surprised the motherfucker didn't have a heart attack back then. You know what I mean? He's flexing every muscle, just looking jacked as shit, looking angry as shit. And, that was amazing. Hulk Hogan in his early career, obviously, like when he was, not in his early career, but when he was in his prime, like in the 80s, really, right? Although I personally don't think so. I think the NWO Hulk Hogan was the prime, but whatever, right? In his physical prime in the 80s, Hulk Hogan, classic hero, like telling everybody, take your vitamins, say your prayers, you know what I mean? Everybody loved Hulk Hogan, right? Everybody. One of the haters' good friends, he's black, and he doesn't like that Hulk Hogan became a little bit of a racist later on. But he did tell me once, when he was a kid, he's a little older than the hater, he's like in his 40s, I think. He did tell me that, like, when he was very small, he didn't know wrestling was fake. And he saw that Hulk Hogan lost to somebody, and he cried. And his mom had to, kind of console him, but the mom didn't want to, break the news to him that wrestling's fake, right? So she was, trying to console him, be like, look, it's okay, he'll win next time type of shit, That's the kind of impact Hulk Hogan had, Hulk Hogan, rest in peace, bro. You stood for something important. You stood for good wrestling. You stood for story-driven wrestling. And more importantly, he is ring psychology, right? He is the guy that can get you excited for what's happening in the ring more than anybody else. I will finish with this. Seeing the Hulk up, right? Or even the entrance, or even the post-match presentation of Hulk Hogan is infinitely more entertaining than anything that AEW, ROH, and the majority of WWE has ever produced. It's as simple as that. Hulk Hogan could get the entire crowd to go along with everything he did because he was that charismatic, right? And as a matter of fact, I said a few days ago that The Rock is one of the most charismatic people of all time. I stand by it, right? One of you, I think it was Kenny Hudson. It could have been anybody, but I think it was Kenny Hudson had been this. He said the only one that comes close to The Rock, the only one that's like the same, is Donald Trump. But I would put Hogan in there, in that bitch. You know what I mean? Because fundamentally what happened was WrestleMania, probably the best WrestleMania match in terms of pure entertainment. The Rock versus Hogan. In that match, the Hulkster came in as a heel, and he turned the crowd without even wanting to. Just by sheer presence. And he was next to the fucking Rock, motherfuckers. They didn't put him against Anarchia. They didn't put him against Gilbert. They didn't put him against S.A. Rios. They put him against The Rock. The other guy. The one who's just almost as equal. And he overcame The Rock on insurmountable odds, right? Incredible. Hulk Hogan, thank you for everything you've done. May you rest in peace, and may your legacy also be restored to what it should be. A legend, a pioneer, and someone that we should all be thankful for. Because if it weren't for Hulk Hogan, you can forget fucking Gunther and Trick Williams. They would fucking be working in a warehouse in Austria and wherever the fuck Trick Williams is from, respectively. They'd be school teachers or some shit. You know what I mean? They'd be having regular-ass jobs. You never see these guys. But forget about them. You wouldn't have The Rock. You wouldn't have Stone Cold. Anybody that you like as a wrestler idolized Hulk Hogan at some point. So, as a result, motherfuckers, you take care of yourselves. And in the hater channel, we keep it light, we keep it tight, and we don't cry. We move on up in this bitch. But we do recognize the people that have made an impact. And if it weren't for Hulk Hogan, fundamentally, because like I said, if there's no Hulk Hogan, then there is no Rock. And if there's no Rock, probably the hater never gets into wrestling. And if the hater never gets into wrestling, then there's no fucking hater channel, motherfucks. And all of us would be a little bit worse off. I'd be a lot worse off because this is one of my favorite passions and hobbies, and the hater's getting paid. You know what I mean? So without Hulk Hogan, none of this would be possible. So don't bite the hand that feeds and be thankful for what we had. Hulk Hogan, rest in peace, brother.